delay. We had some technical difficulties, but we're up and running. And for those of you at home, welcome as well. And I would like to present Kathy Kilmer, and she is a lifelong Methodist and has been at St. Andrew's for 22 years. And she is married and has 2 lovely children, and she's very passionate about what she's going to talk about, which is our climate crisis. And she has some other information about the legislation, and she has a sign up on the table in the back for those of you that would like to get additional information. Anything else I'm supposed to say? Is that good?
Thank
All right,
you.
welcome, Kathy.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here with you tonight. Let's start in an attitude of prayer. Creator Spirit, seize us with your power and light. Help us to protect all life, to prepare for a better future, for the coming of your kingdom of justice, peace, love, and beauty. May it be so. Amen. So tonight I want to tell you a little bit about my own journey to activism on climate change, and then talk about a little bit about what's going on, and then give you some hopeful news about some good progress that's being made, and have time for a discussion and answers and questions to any thoughts that come up this evening. I'd like to start with the slide about the shortgrass prairie, if you don't mind, Anne. Yeah, isn't that gorgeous? If you can imagine it, this is what the whole Front Range once looked like. In the span of about 2 or 3 lifetimes, it looked like this. And the land that we're standing on right now was once shortgrass prairie like this. It's an amazing ecosystem. It's been compared to the pampas of South America. And it's one of the most endangered biomes in North America because, of course, we've been here a long time and we've done what we've done to it. We've built homes and churches and parking lots, and we've farmed it. So, could I have the next slide? Just so you have a sense of what was here, there were gray wolves and bison and pronghorn, grizzlies. Those are burying owls. I just think they're the cutest critters. And the next slide. And just wonderful wildflowers, a wonderful world for pollinators. And as you probably know, pollinators are in trouble now, partly because of the habitat destruction that's gone on. So I'm not telling you this to feel guilty, because it's just fact of life. This is what we've done to our environment. There's ecosystems of different kinds all around the world that have been destroyed because we're here. But I think that if we're a little bit more careful, we might be able to live a little bit more gently on the land and maybe even restore some of these areas. So we'll be talking a little bit about that. And then I also wanted to acknowledge the people that were on this land before we ever came here, and that was the Kiowa, the Comanche, and the Arapaho. They all hunted on the shortgrass prairie. So a little bit of land history and land acknowledgement there. Next slide, please. I spent, the next one after that. Thank you. I spent my career at the Wilderness Society. It's a national conservation organization that works to protect public lands and the nation's wildest places. Colorado has a lot of wilderness areas. I bet you've been in one. A wilderness area has great benefits for wildlife and natural ecosystems. I was working for the Wilderness Society in Washington, D.C. in the 1980s when I came across a report, I think it was from the EPA, and it was talking about this thing called climate change. And I read it cover to cover, and I was just very alarmed. It talked about more, just much stronger storms and hurricanes, tornadoes, coastal erosion and sea level rise. It just sounded almost science fiction in how apocalyptic it sounded. And I thought, boy, I sure hope my government does something about this. Well, if you'll change the slide, thank you. Every few years, the UN and the IPCC report comes out. And the IPCC is scientists, climate scientists from around the globe, and they work on all different issues of climate science and try to give us a roadmap for what's coming and how we can deal with it. So every few years, this report comes out, and people get concerned, but not a whole lot has been happening, folks, until this year. Or last year, so we'll get to that. Next slide, please. So here we are 40 years later, and what I read in the 1980s is in fact coming to pass. The storms are horrendous. Our hurricanes carry far more water in them, so there's more floods because of our warming oceans. And I've read about tornadoes that are 3 miles wide. I could never even imagine such a thing. And of course, right here, we're experiencing a 1,000-year drought. And then we have wildfires around the whole world, not just here in the West. So I'm going to guess that most of you have kids. How many folks here have kids? Yeah. How many grandkids? Yeah. So if we don't do something, if we don't drastically reduce our use of fossil fuels, here's a taste of what they might experience. And if you could that's great, thank you. 80 to 100 million displaced persons. We're already seeing climate migrants. Folks from Guatemala, Haiti, for example, are already at our borders looking for some place to live. More disease, water and food shortages, conflicts and wars, and economic upheaval. And species extinction. So as people of faith, these are things we work on. These are the things that we want to try to improve. Hunger, poverty, homelessness, and all of these things are going to be magnified 100-fold if we don't get things right now. Next slide, please. And I don't have to tell you that as people of faith, we care the most about the least, the last, and the lost. And these are the most vulnerable people when it comes to climate change. Climate scientists and policymakers will talk about the global south. And basically what they're saying is the global south, so South America and India, I think parts of China, Australia, they are going to be the hardest hit just because of where they're located on the planet. So again, these are the people that we are, as people of faith, are called to help. Next slide, please. So it's been called global warming, climate change. I call it a climate crisis. More and more scientists and activists are calling it a climate emergency. But whatever you call it, it is an existential threat, a threat to all life, including humans. And studying all this stuff, it will come as no surprise to you that in the fall of 2019, I was deeply depressed. I was weeping for what was being lost and what was to come. And I tried to talk about this with my friends and family, and it's the kind of thing that just goes over like a lead balloon at a dinner party, let me tell you. It's not a topic for dinner conversation. So then I heard about climate cafes, and these things originated in Scotland as a safe place to talk about your fears, your anxieties, your grief. And I signed up for one by Zoom. This one took place in England. There were 2 English therapists. There was a young woman from Russia, also by Zoom. There was a gentleman in England, a young woman in New Jersey, and then me and another woman in California. So 3 countries on this Zoom call and a multi-generational call. And we were asked first, next slide please, Ann, to bring something and show on the camera something that represented something that we love in the natural world. And I had a postcard of the Maroon Bells, so I showed that. For me, it's one of the most iconic places in Colorado, right? And I talked about how much I love the forests and how concerned I am because of the bark beetle and the dead standing trees and the threat of forest fires. Other people talked about what they are losing in their parts of the world. And then we talked about things that we were most anxious about. And the young woman from Russia who had a baby said she wasn't sure that she'd made the right decision. And the two young people, one from England and one from New Jersey, they said the same thing. They're not sure they would have children. And you've probably read in the news that there's many reports of the younger generation giving this serious consideration, whether or not to have children. That just broke my heart. So I will say that despite the sadness of this discussion, it lasted about 2 hours, I felt better afterwards. I really think because I finally realized I wasn't alone. I wasn't crazy with these thoughts of anxiety. And then I remembered as a person of faith that I'm never alone. I always have God, and I always have the faith community. And so I felt better. I felt much better. If you're interested in a climate cafe, and you can do it online or you can go in person, there are 2 women in the metro area, 2 therapists who do host those. And I'm happy to put you in touch with them. Maybe it's something, we've done it at St. Andrew for the staff, actually. It's something, if it's something you might want to organize, let me know, I'll give you the information. Pam was reminding me that our national church puts on a climate cafe every month, or is that the Mount Sky Conference?
I believe it was the national, because we had people.
Do you want?
Because we had people from, I believe it was a national. We had people from the Philippines, Tonga, several people throughout the United States, and so I'm not sure if it was the Mountain Sky that hosted it or not. I'm sorry.
But we can get you, if you're interested in attending,
Yes.
we can get you that information.
Yes, I have lots of opportunities for you all.
It's very different from the climate cafes that I attended, because that one is intentionally small, so everybody can speak and share. And this one has a larger number of people, and in breakout rooms you talk about a different topic. I think it has great value. Yeah. So in deciding to move forward for myself, I realized that action is required. I'm a person of action. Inaction is not an option. And so I went to speak to my pastor at church and asked him if we could start a green group. And he reminded me that my church had had one for many years, and it just kind of petered out, as some groups will do. There's growth and death in every group, but these folks had done a lot when we built our new sanctuary in helping build it with very good green efficiencies and that sort of thing. And one of the other things they had done was a couple of them went out to the shortgrass prairie. Yes, we are built on a shortgrass prairie hill in Highlands Ranch. And they rescued some of those shortgrass prairie plants and planted them in their own yards. They've been nursing them for years. And now we're planning, with our new green group, to reintroduce them to our property. Don't know if it'll be a very large area, but we're going to get started in that way, and I'm pretty excited about that. Next slide, please. So in January of 22, we started a green group, which we called Earth Keepers. And the next slide, if you would. And just to note, we had the support of our senior pastor and our senior church administrator, and that was very important to getting started. The first thing we did was gather together and create a mission statement. We put lots of ideas together and then handed it to someone in our group who's a good writer, and she kind of made it sound better. But moved by our faith, we seek to address the climate crisis and other ecological impacts, such as the mass extinction of species, through education and action at home, in our church, and in our community. So if you could do the next slide, Ian. So we've held events. We had a holiday market of green things that you could buy that would make your holiday more sustainable. We did a plastic-free July. This is an international event to try to make people more aware of their use of plastics and help them get rid of those single-use plastic habits. We're going to be doing a demonstration of electric vehicles and electric bicycles in May. And then we've taught ourselves about water, native planting, turf removal, and we had an energy audit at our church recently. It took many months, and we've had some very eye-opening news, and we have our work cut out for us to make our church facility much more sustainable. So those are some of the things we've been doing. Next slide, please. I also found out that the Mountain Sky Conference has a great deal going on, trying to help churches understand how to be more sustainable. And they have a group that meets once a month. Anyone can join it. They try to provide resources for churches, and in fact, just last night they had a major webinar. Did you attend? Great. It was a webinar about making your church more energy efficient on the government's dime. So one of the pieces of legislation I'll be talking about in a minute had lots of incentives for nonprofits, and including churches, to become more energy efficient. And so you attended the webinar. That's very exciting, and hopefully that will help as you guys figure out what you're going to do next. So if you're interested in joining that, thank you, Ann, that's perfect. If you're interested in joining the Mountain Sky Conference Climate Justice Task Force, you're very welcome, and just see me and I'll give you information about how to do that. So this is Antonio Guterres. He is the UN Secretary General. I feel so sorry for the guy, because like every 6 months he's coming out screaming, the sky is falling, and the sky really is falling, and it doesn't seem like anything gets done. But he must be a man of faith, because he keeps at it. And just a few days ago, he pointed out that we're nearing the point of no return. We are at the tip of the tipping point. He was talking about the fact that we are reaching for the 1.5 degrees Celsius that scientists and policymakers have said we need to stay below that level of warming in order to have the best outcome for our kids. And we're really reaching towards it now. But he says it's not too late, and it isn't too late. Scientists, policymakers have told us for years that we have what it takes to deal with this problem. We just need to use our willpower to get it done. And the most important thing is we need to wean ourselves from plastic's a good one. It's actually fossil fuels, which are in plastic. We need to wean ourselves from fossil fuels, and it's a tough one. I mean, I think everybody here probably drove tonight. There might be a couple of bicycle riders, but I certainly drove tonight. So by 2040, we need to reach net zero. Net zero is roughly the balance between the amount of greenhouse gases we produce and the amount we sequester, either through technology or through plant uptake of carbon dioxide, that sort of thing. So we have 17 years, which sounds like a lot, but it's precious little time, to wean ourselves from fossil fuels. So next slide, please, Ann. Yeah, so this is the legislation that I was so excited about last summer, the Inflation Reduction Act, which is a crazy name for what is basically a Let's Deal with Climate Crisis Act, and then the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill, which passed a little bit earlier last year. And the two bills together have all kinds of things for helping us really jumpstart our dealing with this crisis. It's going to lead to vast systemic change. So we're going to have far more charging stations so that you don't have to worry about running out of electricity in your electric vehicle when you're going from here to, say, Bozeman, Montana. Not that I know that that's a problem, but we're going to have charging stations. It's going to have money for rural co-ops, which often use coal for power, to invest in clean energy instead of coal. There's money for loans that the Department of Energy can make. There's money for a green bank that will make low-interest loans to people and nonprofits that want to convert to renewable energy. And then boosting the grid. You may know that one of the issues with our grid is it's old, it doesn't connect with other parts of the country, and this would get us state-of-the-art grid technology that would allow, from region to region, would allow us to share power. So yeah, Ann, in the Colorado legislature, there's been really good work done too. A few years ago, we passed a bill there that creates an Office of Just Transition. And this was because they saw that we were going to be closing down coal-fired power plants, and they wanted to help coal workers find another industry to get into, a different career path. So that now exists, and what the legislature is looking at now is a bill that would study whether it would be feasible to extend those same services to oil and gas workers, because we are going to need to close down oil and gas development in our state. It will be over a period of time, but so I'm proud of our legislature for looking at this instead of just saying, go take care of yourself. They're trying to help them make that transition. The greenhouse gas reduction bill is probably the most important bill in the legislature for climate change. It would change our state goal. Right now, our state goal for net zero is 2050, and I think I told you that 2040 is where it needs to be for us to avoid the worst of the impacts. And then agrivoltaics and aquavoltaics is a very exciting new technology. In California, they're putting solar panels on their canals. And so, because here's a great use of space, right, for solar panels, but it keeps the evaporation from the canals. It lowers the evap, so they're saving water that way. We could do the same thing, say, on Dillon Lake, although probably people like to boat on Dillon Lake. But where there are large bodies of water, we could turn that into a solar production area. That's aquavoltaics. And then agrivoltaics is the same thing, but using the same idea with crops. So we have up in Longmont, I think, there's a really great demonstration project. A young farmer up there is raising crops underneath all these solar panels. And so he's getting the benefit of the solar energy that he's producing, but he can also continue to raise his crops. So really exciting things there. And the legislation just creates a study panel for those kinds of things so that we can come back in a year or two and say, yes, this is very feasible, this is how we can do it. We need the legislature to put this much money in, and we'll get it done. Next slide, please. I'll get to this in a second, but I just wanted to mention some of you are interested in legislation, and as Pam mentioned, there's a sign-up list out in the foyer there where you can receive an email, not very often, maybe once a month, twice a month, during the legislative season, which goes from January to May, and will let you know about actions you can take to help pass some of these bills. Okay. So here's another piece of good news. EV sales are surging. I bet you've seen a lot more Teslas on the road. I have. And anybody here drive an EV? Yeah? Excellent. Excellent. I just got one. It's smarter than me. Anyway, more charging stations are being built. EV sales increased by 75% from 21 to 22, while regular car sales went down a little bit. And I know that not everybody can afford one of these right now, but lots and lots of models are coming in the next 5 years, and we're going to see them contribute to being a lower price, more economical model, so more people can drive them. So let's see where I am. Okay. Is there another slide, Ann? That's it, yeah. So I don't know if you've ever heard of the Rocky Mountain Institute, but it's up in Aspen. Been there for years and years. They do really innovative research. And they were taking a look at renewables, solar and wind power, and how well it's being accepted and used in this country. And what they discovered, it is on the same track that automobiles were and phones. In terms of transformational industries. And so basically what they're saying is they're seeing the same trends with renewables that we saw with the invention of the car. And they are speculating that within about 5 years, we're going to see fossil fuel use as electricity start to decline by 4% a year. So that's really kind of geeky. I probably shouldn't have put that slide in there. Anyway, next slide, please, Ann. it's just another example of how we're moving in the right direction, folks. So I read Project Drawdown a couple years ago, and they come out with new, they refresh the information on a regular basis. Their website is a hoot to visit, especially if you have any kind of interest in technical stuff. They have all kinds of things that are going on in the world that you've never heard of. And it's just a really fun place to visit if you're starting to feel a little down about where we're at, because there is a great deal going on in the world of invention. Okay, next slide, please. So this is audience participation. I'd like you to call out, if you have some ideas, how we can reduce our use of fossil fuels. For example, how do we reduce our use of cars or trucks, freight? Any ideas?
Work at home.
Work at home, I love it. Yeah.
Use the public transportation we've got.
If we had better transportation, it's a little problematic for us, but absolutely, yeah. Well, one thing oh yes, you have something?
Well, eating local produce
That's right,
cuts down on truck.
exactly. Eating and buying locally too, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Set your winter thermostat at 68.
Great idea. And here's another one. If your furnace is reaching the end of its useful life, look at heat pumps. Now, they've gotten a bad rap over the years, but they've really been improved on for places that are cold, like Colorado. There are people that swear by them, and there are great rebates right now from Excel or the state that will help you pay to put in a heat pump in your home if you need a new furnace. Other ideas for transport? Well, carpooling. I used to carpool a lot when I had kids at home, and recently I've started asking my girlfriends for rides to different events, and it's surprising how many people say, sure. Nobody's ever said no. And it actually is a great way to be together, create a little bit more of community for all those people that are working from home. There's a gentleman here, Pam, that has a thought.
So, I mean, you've kind of referred to this, but basically use that as, I mean, we are dependent on our vehicles right now, but use that as a criteria for your next vehicle.
Thank you, absolutely. Yeah. If you're reaching the end of the life of your vehicle, or you know that it's not going to last much more than 5 or 10 years, make sure that this is your last ICE vehicle, ICE being internal combustion engine. Yeah.
And what about light rail, getting that to the more populated areas and up to the hills?
Yeah, that would be nice. That's something we could advocate for as a group, yeah. Okay, well, that's great, thank you. And then home. We talked about heat pumps at home and turning down the heat. Any other thoughts about reducing fossil fuel use at home?
Fossil fuels are used for plastics. So I've started using shampoo as a bar, which is really cool, and it works great. So I don't have the bottle of shampoo anymore, which is kind of fun. I have deodorant that comes out of cardboard instead of plastic. So those kinds of things. I have beeswax covers instead of using plastic wrap.
Wonderful,
So, yeah.
wonderful. And where do you find those things?
Mostly from my daughter-in-law.
Great, great.
There's a store up on Tennyson and 36th or 43rd or something that has a lot of those things. You can take your container in and fill it with
Yes.
every kind of liquid there is. I use silk floss instead of Teflon. So yeah, there are
Have you gotten a
stores around.
bamboo toothbrush yet?
No, I haven't done that.
There's so many alternatives, folks, that will decay in the environment and not hang around for thousands of years.
Put solar panels on your house.
Solar panels on your house. Oh,
You can get Excel to hook them up.
we're waiting for Excel to hook ours up, but I wanted to tell you that solar panels have reduced by 73% in the cost of solar panels over the last 12 years. And my husband and I just got some on our roof. We paid $13,000, and that doesn't include the tax incentive, which we will get next year, of 23% tax credit of that $13,000. So it's much more affordable today. And yeah, the other thing about, yeah, go ahead.
Well, we have had solar now for 2 full years, and the first year we gave Excel 141 kilowatt hours more than we used, and we pay $5.70 a month for electricity.
That's brilliant. So they do pay off. They pay off for themselves in a while. Yeah. Back behind you, Pam.
Our solar panels were installed 12, 13, 14 years ago.
Well done.
And the anticipated return on investment was 5-point-something years. And some of those things don't work out. Ours did. It paid for itself. And now our electricity is, virtually all of our electricity for many years has been free, with the exception of the taxes at the end, right? But we just bought an EV, and that takes some electricity. So
Yeah.
I just called them today and to see if we could add some more panels.
Oh, great.
Go from there.
Good. Good. So there's green in 2 ways with solar panels. You get the benefit economically, but also you're helping the planet. Any other thoughts?
Good windows and doors and insulation.
There, Excel has an energy audit that you can get for, there's 2 kinds. There's a basic one for $50, and there's a more complicated one for, I think, $150. That one includes a brand new thermostat, and a programmable thermostat, and they will weather strip one of your doors, and they'll take that infrared camera and check out where all your leaks are. It's a great deal, folks. And you just go on Excel and look up their home energy audit solution. Oh, the coolest thing is they replace all your light bulbs in your house with LEDs. I thought I had done that, and I was astonished how many regular light bulbs they found in my house and replaced them with brand new LEDs. It was a bargain, I'll tell you. Okay. Well, that's great. Thank you for all those ideas. Now, travel. This is a tricky one. A single transatlantic airplane flight, round trip. 1.5 tons of carbon dioxide, about the equivalent of what a single person in India produces in carbon dioxide in a year. So I love to travel, and I left a lot of my travel till retirement, but I'm having second thoughts now about whether I'm going to be able to do that. So I'm not going to belabor this, but if you're planning a transcontinental trip, I hope you really enjoy yourself. Oh, gosh. Okay, the next slide, please. Be a good climate citizen. The most important thing you can do is vote for candidates that you know are going to do something about this. We can advocate, as we've already talked about doing, by signing up for different groups that are already doing that work in the legislature, and when they need your help, they'll call on you. I happen to really like 350 Colorado. It was started by a guy named Bill McKibben, who is a United Methodist. And he actually started 350.org, which is a national organization with chapters now in most of the states. And the one that I work with is 350 Colorado. Invest wisely. We already saw that graphic about oil and gas, fossil fuels possibly having peaked and starting to decline in terms of their electricity use. And so you might want to look at your investment portfolio and decide if you need to make some changes in that regard. Certainly, you could look at your bank to see if your bank is funding fossil fuel development. A lot of banks have refused to do that. And seems like there was something else. Oh, many endowments and pension funds are divesting themselves of fossil fuel funds, so that's really good. And the next slide, please. This is another really controversial one. I was talking to Wendy Wall. Do some of you know Wendy Wall? Yeah, she's a great gal. She put these slides together for me, and so I was talking to her about it, and she says she loves cows, and she loves meat, and I know about that. But if they were their own nation, they'd be the world's third largest emitter of greenhouse gases after cars and trucks and transportation and buildings. So what can we do about it? Well, the good news is scientists are working on converting seaweed to some kind of supplement that you can feed to cows that will reduce their production of methane belching. And methane, if you don't know it, is a greenhouse gas that is it's a whole lot more powerful than carbon dioxide. So if we could get those belches under control, then the problem is that so many people love beef. And people around the country, us oldsters, us elders, think about how much meat you ate when you were a kid. I mean, my family, we didn't eat beef very often. Maybe yours did, but we didn't. And now, even the developing countries, they developed a taste for beef. And so we have so many more situations where wonderful ecosystems are being cleared to produce cattle, for cattle ranches. And if we could get some of the demand for beef down, I think it could help a lot. Also, what other ideas for changing our menu to eat more sustainably?
Well, if they would change the cow menu, if they would even change the cow menu, part of the methane production is from feeding corn, because it's, you can turn a cow around from a calf to slaughter in like 8-9 months if you corn feed them. They also get lovely marbled or a whole lot extra fat because of that. But that's a lot of the methane production is from that, because they're not genetically, they're grass eaters, not corn eaters.
Okay.
So there's a whole lot that's locked into that. But we can look at, as Pat Joe mentioned, being able to eat locally, being able to get a little garden ourselves, maybe pull a little of that grass out and put in a little garden that we can ourselves. Also, our demand for so much of our food, when we want our summer vegetables in the winter, or summer fruits in the winter, are grown in South America. And so many of countries in the South are basically owned by United States companies and grow those and then fly them up here. So there's, transportation costs, there's your transcontinental flight right there, so I can have my strawberries this month. And bananas, whole banana republic, that's a whole thing. Central America, I'll be quiet now.
All good stuff, thank you. Anything else? So there's this thing called Meatless Monday. It's just a way to kind of remind yourself, hey, maybe one day a week I should eat all non-meat, so all vegetarian, one day a week. And they decided to use the term Meatless Monday. So that's something to think about. You could also make it a Meatless Tuesday. It really doesn't matter. But next slide, please. The most important thing to do as you make these changes in your lives is to share the information with others. Social scientists have found that humans really do evaluate what their peers are doing, and it influences their decisions. And more than that, when we're in community, sharing the things that we're doing that make us feel good makes other people feel good, and it gives them good ideas. I've seen this happen in our green group at church. I've seen it happen with a green group of friends that meet on a regular basis. We encourage each other, we inspire each other, and I'd love to see how Hope UMC moves in that direction. Every generation has its challenge, and this one is ours. And the question is, will we rise to the challenge? So thank you for inviting me here tonight. I'm happy to answer questions or get a discussion going, whatever you feel moved to.
Other questions, thoughts? One of the things that I have learned over the last couple of days was that 45% of the businesses that did this audit, that is a free tool, was found to have been wasting 35% of their energy. So I'm hoping that Hope will consider starting to look at our usage, and I know we already have with the grass out there and the water, and there's some ideas that are coming down the pike for the extension agent to help fund planting of trees and some Earth Day kinds of activities. So anyway, it's pretty exciting, and there is hope.
Sorry to be a little negative, but a lot of what we talked about is for individual action, perhaps getting into small groups for a little bit larger impact. But isn't this only going to be solved by political agreement and forced legislation that you might want to try this? No, you must do this worldwide. I mean, it has to be. I mean, like China is terrible. So is the United States in terms of pollution, air pollution. And I don't think individuals, by changing to a heat pump, a few, if X percent, 10%, 30%, whatever, is going to handle it. It's got to be forced, don't you think?
I wouldn't say forced, because that's not the kind of country we live in. But I do agree with you that massive systemic change is needed. And that's why I wanted to show you some of the legislation that's passed that I think is going to help us get some started down that road anyway. I do think that working individually and in community, we create a ripple effect that can bubble up. There was a research done by a Harvard researcher recently that showed that just 3.5% of the population can create real change if they get together and get out there and demonstrate. Now, I've been a demonstrator from way back. I bet some of you are too. I'm not a bomb thrower. I'm just a peaceful demonstrator, and I'd love to see more of that take place. But I do think that until we as a citizenry understand what's at stake and what has to happen, we can't make those systemic changes very easily.
Yeah, I want to comment a little bit on Hal's response. It doesn't require force. And for years, I mean, first the Republicans are for it, and then the Democrats are for it, but they're never for it at the same time, which is a carbon tax. Because the carbon tax really is not a forced solution, but it does balance the economics in an appropriate way, which from my perspective is the least hands-off in terms of trying to interfere with freedoms. Unfortunately, we're still investing money in carbon fuels even.
Right.
And so it becomes a real hard thing to get people to agree. But I think that's something we could all really push for. And honestly, I don't know why either party, well, one party doesn't like anything that's called a tax, I guess. But
Do you all know what a carbon tax would be? It has that word tax in it, and nobody likes that word. Can you explain what the carbon tax would be?
The government is always intervening in energy in any case. But what you would do is basically potentially tax industry for the amount of carbon that they are putting out. And potentially it might end up being that your carbon vehicles end up costing more than non-carbon vehicles. And there's a lot of different ways you can do it, with some of it with individual buyers and some of it with industry, but the industry is the way that I've heard it. So it balances economics in favor of non-carbon fuels. And I'm sorry, may I make another comment?
You can make another comment.
Hal has,
You have 7 minutes.
okay, I'll be quick. Hal has the right idea. I think electric vehicles still have a carbon footprint. It's just the carbon footprint has been shifted to our production system, and that becomes only reasonable when it's a good production system and a low carbon production system. And in fact, I did some calculations. People just drives me crazy because I drive a hybrid, and I actually got all the information from the energy agency. And turns out you're better off driving a hybrid in many states because their production of energy is so bad. He still has it, but what Hal was saying was exactly right. If you've got your solar panels and charge your car, then electric vehicles like the perfect solution.
It is, yeah, it is. And Hal, I understand your frustration. I really do.
You'll probably think this is a silly idea, but everyone is working at home. I wonder if we couldn't travel from home, because everything becoming virtual. We could have like virtual travel clubs where we showed like where we were going, and we could have a travel guide, and it might catch on. You never know.
Yeah, absolutely. We did that as a family recently. We had a slideshow of different trips that our family had gone on. And I remember years ago, our church used to host slideshows of different places that people had been.
I think there are travel shows that you can virtually travel anywhere. Here's another comment.
I just want to bring up one point about how I view it, because I view this. I'm involved in the agricultural industry, and I know that the United States, literally, the U.S. is feeding the world right now. They have been. And that has also been due to the use of fertilizers. And the primary derivative of fertilizers and how they make that, whether it be pellets, dry fertilizer, or liquid, is the use of natural gas. And nobody has figured out yet how they could get away from using natural gas to make the fertilizers to grow the food to feed the world, because we're going to run out of food.
Do you feel like the agricultural industry is staying on top of projections about whether they're going to continue to produce food with less water and more drought and more storms?
They're staying on top of the potential for less water. They're searching and working on a lot of ways where it is reduced, where you have areas that are what we call dry land farming versus irrigated well farming that goes on. I think they are attempting to, but there's the increase in our abilities have been based upon different things. Big one is fertilizers to enhance the growth, to get more bushels per acre. And it's not about just them making more money. It's about the demand that's out there. Mm-hmm. That's why we have China. That's why we have even Russia buying so much of the corn, wheat production from the United States. That is some of the largest exports this country has. There's a reason for it.
Oh, wait. We've got 5 minutes left.
Pam has the mic.
You mentioned agrivoltaics.
Yeah.
Putting solar panels on over crops.
Right.
Pardon my ignorance, but don't most crops require sunshine?
Yeah,
With a
yeah.
Then
Yeah,
what's
we
the
have an
deal?
answer here.
So like just like yesterday, day before, UCLA put out a study where they were testing, because they're translucent solar panels, and they added a chemical to it. I can't remember. I can look up in the article. It's on my Facebook. There's an article about how they've added a chemical which increased the efficiency of the solar panel after 1,000 hours of use, 80% more efficient. And then the plants underneath actually grew better with the addition of this chemical into the solar panel. So it's translucent, so it shines through. They're even talking about doing this on a cell phone, that you would just put a screen cover, and just by holding your phone out in the sun, it would charge as you're using it because you're still able to see through it.
Ooh, I love that
Really
idea.
cool stuff. They're starting a new business to come in and do that. Really cool stuff. It's, I need to go back through, but it's not like, it's organic material. So it's already out there, and it's just like using a vitamin. I can't think of the name of it right now. I'd have to look it up. But it's not like it's a hypoglycemic something or other kind of thing. It's a organic, and that's what they're using in all the solar panels, is organic materials to try to reduce the carbon footprint in creating that.
You know, one thing you talk about, let's take West Virginia, okay, or you take Southwest Virginia. There's a responsibility. I'm not for I'm traveling right down the road with you. But there's some kind of responsibility, whether it's a government or anybody, to those families who've been there, their great-grandparents, they've done it. Maybe they've just got an 8th grade education, but that's their soul. And even that is it. So there's some question that we have to do collectively as to how do we phase that out?
Yeah, I totally agree with you.
Not even just coal. We can go gas right here, probably somewhere in Colorado.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A very good point.
Good questions, good comments. Thank you all.
Well, please give me, email me or sign up for the legislative updates if you'd like to hear from us. And it's been a pleasure to see you tonight. Thank you.